A very warm welcome to you, and thank you so much for joining our Homeopathy 24/7 podcast. We are going to be speaking to an array of international guests who will share their knowledge and experiences of homeopathy with you. We will discuss all types of subjects such as remedies, symptoms, and stories of health. No matter where you are with your homeopathic journey, we aim to inspire you on your quest to natural health and living. The podcast is brought to you by Mary Greensmith, the founder of Homeopathy 24/7, which is a global platform connecting you with a homeopath wherever you are in the world, 24 hours a day. So let's get started with today's chat. Please welcome Mary Greensmith.
Hello, lovely to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm really, really pleased to be able to welcome back Ren Lloyd. Lovely to see you, Ren.
Hi, Mary.
Hi, I am so excited about just having this opportunity just to talk with you because we're quite alike in some ways, I think.
Oh, yes.
And we love life. And actually, the more I get to know about you, because we've known each other for a few years now, the more I realize that everything about your life you have chosen.
Yeah.
So where you live, how you bring up your children, how you homeschool, how you buy food, how you create food, everything about that. So I would like to ask you just more about the choices you've made in your life. Is that okay?
Yeah, I was just thinking when you were saying that, that there's five of us, and six of us in total in my family, my immediate family. And I was just thinking, yeah, everybody else came along kicking and screaming. I just suddenly realized when you spoke about it being choices, I suddenly thought, I'm not sure that the other people in my family would necessarily have made those choices. There was kind of choices that I've made for everybody on a level, and they've come along partly because the children and they don't have much choice, and partly because my husband's very cooperative and goes along with what I want, I suppose. It is very much like that, making choices. It's difficult to make choices when you're in a partnership or in a family. Yeah. And I'm not somebody that is dictatorial by nature. So I think the choices I've made have been important enough to me, that I felt they were really important for the people that are in my family, for my children and my husband too. So they've come along with me.
But you are so inspiring anyway. So I'm sure that you
I'm not sure
sold
they call it
them.
that. I'm not entirely sure they'd call it that. Like it's not, how it is because Mary, you and I are mavericks, which is where we kind of like really sort of vibe with each other. We're frontiers people. We just come out and on the frontier. I have no idea how you come to be so unafraid to do that. For me, I feel like it's part in my nature to do that, to do things differently, but it's also you have to get the courage to do it, and you have that courage because you really have the conviction that it's important for yourself and the people around you.
Yeah, because you make your life, don't you? You make every aspect of that. So let's just start with letting everybody know where you live, and I know that you've got land and you've got vegetables and I know that you had lambs this year as well. So
Yes, we did. It's quite interesting. The lambs actually we had a little bit of a drama with our lambs. Yeah,
okay.
so I live on a small holding, which has definitely been a choice of mine, which is not 100% aligned with what others want in my family. We lived in Massachusetts in farmland, and it suited me so much to live. We lived in the Happy Valley, as it's known, on the common at Hadley, where they built the first stockades in the Pioneer Valley. And the big common, which we lived off the edge of in a very old house, was the common where they built that original stockade. And then they built the houses out round. So that house was built 1750s, and some of them were built in the 1713 region. I loved it. I loved the community spirit there. I loved being in farmland. So when we had to come back to the UK, which I wasn't too happy about, I had a promise that we would live in farmland.
Okay.
And that took 10 years to materialize. So we lived in Buxton for 10 years.
Okay.
And I had an allotment,
Yeah.
a couple of allotments covered in horsetail. And I dragged my 3 small children at the time there, but they weren't, they were, this is wonderful the first 2 times they went.
Yeah.
And then after that, it was nothing. So we managed to produce the rhubarb that was already on the plot, and that was about it. And so I dreamt of having a kitchen garden right next to the kitchen, which I now have. But I discovered I'm actually I'm a good gardener. I have a lot of knowledge, but I'm not a very applied gardener. So a lot of the time it's like my brain is so far off in other things and other projects that I often don't grow a huge amount. I planted a lot this year and none of it came up because the weather was just like discouragingly bad for raising anything. So I've at the moment I've got a huge amount of sea beet, which I gathered from where my father's buried in near Rainham in the marshes.
Okay.
And it's self-seeded, so we've got a huge amount of sea beet, but very little else. That's
Okay.
polytunnel is full. The polytunnel's full.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. So you have a polytunnel. And so you moved to it's an old house in the middle
Old
of
farmhouse.
it's
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Staffordshire in the middle of the UK, really, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of our nearest big city is probably Stoke-on-Trent.
Okay.
My husband works up in Manchester, but he only commutes in some days a week.
Okay.
But yeah, it's we're up on the moorlands, the Staffordshire moorlands, and we're here in part because the house had a pub, and we really liked the house. But we're here in part because we used to come to a homeschooling group in the village where we now live, and every time I drove across, I would just have these visions because I'm somebody that holds a vision of what I love and try to materialize it. And I held visions of having a small holding out this way on the moorlands because the moorlands are so beautifully flat and open. They remind me of the sea, and I grew up by the sea. My father was a conservationist. He died when I was young, but he was a conservationist. His favorite bird was the curlew, and I used to see the curlews flying up here in nesting time. And so for me, it was a kind of like, it does feel like being by the sea because it's wide open. I think you have to be where it's good for you, you know.
Yes.
And I had a long time, I have complex PTSD. So I had a long time, it was very difficult for me to live in towns and cities. And so living in the wide open countryside was really important for me. I think it's not as important now because I've done a lot of healing, but I think it was really important for me earlier on. Yeah,
That's really interesting. And you mentioned there about homeschooling as well.
that's right. Yeah. So I started homeschooling with one of my children who didn't want to go to school. Now she curses me. She curses me for it because I think she felt like she didn't belong anywhere as a result. And it is difficult. I think if everybody homeschooled, there would be a much easier thing, and it's not straightforward. So I'm 20 something years down the line. We started in 2004, and I have pros and cons about it, but I know that my eldest daughter, who's in Australia, is now homeschooling her child and very convinced to do so. And I am still quite convinced about homeschooling because I don't like to institutionalize children. I think it's like there are pros and cons, but I think what they have gained in being able to think for themselves, for being able to be trailblazers or entrepreneurs, or to have that spirit, I think you can retain it in school. I clearly went through the whole of school and managed to retain it. I'm not quite sure how. Yourself, Mary, as well. Yeah. But it's school does knock the genius out of people. They have done quite a lot of testing on it. So
yeah, and creativity and of course in the UK there aren't many people who homeschool. In the US we talk to a lot of people, and there are a lot of communities that do homeschool and
there are actually lots in the UK, it has to be said, but they tend to be it tends to be around autism or some reason.
Yeah,
and arguably my children are not neurotypical. My three younger ones are certainly not neurotypical, and I'm not neurotypical. But I think they found it difficult to forge friendships inside, however much time we might spend in the community. I think they found it challenging.
Yes.
But I think I think it was it was difficult, but I think that's only really looking from the point of view of my second daughter, who has shown me how it turned out for her. You know, that I came in with a very ideal idea of how life could be, and I parented with that in mind. You know, what do I think is important for my children? What do I want to promote? So attachment parenting, you know, through and through. I was a solid attachment parent because I studied psychology, child psychology and so on, and education. So I was really in a place where I wanted to do things differently for my children. Whether they feel good about having had things done differently is another matter. But in the long run, I think that the pros are there. They're just it's a bit difficult to balance them with the cons that they felt. So
it's very interesting that what you're saying about the decisions that you make are based on your experiences, and of course then your children go through it, and then they might go through an argumentative stage of course, you know, when they first go out into the world, they are not, you know, they suddenly realize that they have had a slightly different upbringing. And I remember when my daughter went to Mexico, she was traveling, and she was quite, you know, would never tell anybody that I was a homeopath. And then suddenly in Mexico, she had the best mum ever. You know, she was suddenly contacting me and recommending things, and you know, it was accepted.
This is yet to happen for me.
Is it? Yeah. Well, I'm going to say that it will happen, and they will suddenly realise that actually,
hopefully,
as you say, your daughter in Australia, when she goes through the schools and see what's happening. Then
that's a funny thing as well, because this will make you laugh, but when she was a child and teenager, we used to have a book called Nourishing Traditions, which is a book about going right the way back to basics with food. It's a very important thing for us health-wise, especially for the Americans with their SAD diet. You know, I'm not judging, but you know, I'm astounded by it. I think it's a little bit better than in the UK than it is there, but you know, diet is impacting our health so badly. You know, just our dental health, that our teeth are canaries in the mine. You know, they're telling us there are problems. But that's why I sort of have my teeth course as well. I have a course on learning how to eat and heal your teeth with homeopathy. But it's really, really important for us to do that. But when she went to Australia, first of all, when she went to university, she texted or phoned me and said, "Mum, this is really funny because somebody in my shared housing opened my cupboard and said, 'You don't have any food, all you've got is ingredients.'" And this was her being quoted back to herself by her housemate, because she would always say at home, "We don't have any food, we've only got ingredients." When she went to Australia, and her much hated book was on her mother-in-law's table, she went into her little pantry, and there was Nourishing Traditions. She was like, "Mom." And now she's like come full circle. She makes her own bread. She makes her own yogurt. I think, you know, I think she was looking into cheese making, and you know, she's come full circle. But I'm not sure everybody will come full circle, because I think for me, the place I felt most at home probably was at school, out in the community. I felt more affirmed out in the world than at home when I was a child. And my children have had a huge amount of affirmation at home. But I think that in retrospect, for one of my children, she felt that she was excluded from the outside world. So now she struggles with feeling like she belongs out there. You know, and it's, for me, it was, I took it for granted because I had it in school, and because it was such a positive place for me to be. I took it for granted that just exists.
Yes.
I think you can actually be isolated from the outside world if you're very integrated in your family. So it's about balance. And sometimes we, in our infinite wisdom, we do a pendulum swing.
Yes.
And I did sort of like, I was like, I'm going to do it this way. I'm never going to do it that way. I'm going to do it this way. And I did a big pendulum swing, and maybe I could have swung a little further to the center. It's what we're doing, isn't it? We're learning.
Absolutely. But it's so important as well to understand that we are really just caretakers of our children, aren't we? And they have to go out and experience the world and make their own decisions. And every decision that they make is really, really important for what they need right now. And it doesn't mean, I don't believe that there's any wrong decisions ever.
No.
I think that
Okay,
every
that's good.
decision you make,
I'll embrace that.
yeah, every decision you make, it just leads you on to
Yeah.
something that you really need for the next stage in your life.
Yeah.
And it's important that we try many different ways. So yeah, I just think that it's important that our choices are not everybody's choices. And as you said, you kind of influence the family to come along with different things. But
Yeah, you can't help it. I mean, you are often as women, we're the manager.
Yeah.
So, that was quite a realization for me. Everybody's, the children don't have much choice. You're the manager, but my husband in a lot of ways just stepped back and left me to manage.
Okay.
And so I'm the manager. I'm like, sorry guys, but I'm a real libertarian. It's very difficult for me to impose things upon people. So I was a little too laissez-faire, probably as a parent, and in retrospect. I just think, how can you're going through life parenting your children, giving them what you believe at the time is what they need. That's all you can do. You can't see how they're going to receive what you give. And each child that gets the same kind of thing is going to receive it in different ways. So there's no way that you can try and travel forwards and then come back and do it differently. And if you did, you'd be in a complete confusion because everybody needs something different. And I try to flex to the different thing that everybody needs. But yeah, I mean, I'm at that stage where all three of my children, one of my children is 36, but I'm at that stage where three of them are in their teens or early 20s. So it's still reckoning time.
Okay. Yes. So that's quite interesting because both my children are in their 30s.
Yeah.
So yes, I guess I've had 10 years of them going off and doing their own thing and creating. So you were talking to me earlier when we were having a chat about when you perhaps go into the supermarket and the choices that you make with the things that you buy, people even comment on. Tell me a little bit more about that.
So when I go shopping, the cashier nearly always says to me, "Oh my goodness, this is very healthy." And so I was looking at, I get a little self-conscious that they're going to comment. It's okay, but I sort of kind of have it on my radar that it's going to come. And so when I was laying all my stuff out yesterday, I was shopping on my own without my children. And I looked at it and there was not one thing that was prefabricated. It was all ingredients, as my daughter said. There's no food in the cupboard. So ingredients. And I looked at it, it's like just pure ingredients. I can't think of anything that was in it. I got home, I thought, I can't think of one thing. There was one jar of some kind of tomato sauce of some sort that I got for somebody. And, like my kids will go in, and if I go in with my kids, they're quite big, the 23, 20, 16. 20 and 16, they will buy quite a lot of prefabricated food. They're buying products that have been processed in some way. But I just I've always loved to go back to the raw. So I like to go back and actually make the butter.
Yeah.
Like to go back when I used to make bread, because I'm gluten-free, not by choice. When I used to make bread, I used to actually not grow the grain, but I would import the grain in organic form, and then I would sprout it, because it's no longer grain, it's no longer sprouted. Bread is no longer nutritious in the way it was in the past when people lived on it, because it doesn't automatically sprout in the field. It's sprayed with glyphosate to kill the plant off, and then it's immediately collected and stored, so it doesn't sprout and it's covered in nasties. If you sprout it, it sort of breaks down the phytates, which are chemicals that actually chelate minerals in the gut. So they take away your minerals in the gut. and the seed's not sprouted, so you're not getting the nutritional energy of the seed. So what I did for my children and my husband, I used to bake rye for him as well because he's gluten-free. I used to sprout and grind the seed, and then I would make the bread, sourdough. Or I would go back to basics, and I did some cheese making and so on. I've always made yogurt. I remember my mum making yogurt in an airing cupboard, so that was something. I think it's probably my childhood where a lot of this has come from. My mum had a book called Donald Law, which was a book about by Donald Law. Sorry, I can't remember what it was called now, but it's an awesome old book by Donald Law where he talks about foraging and medicine and so on. It's just a really cool book that we had on the bookshelf. So I think I remember as a child being sent out to collect salad in the garden, and it would be chickweed and nasturtiums and dandelion leaves and so on. So I think the influences come from there.
That's really interesting. I actually went up to North Scotland when I was 21 to be self-sufficient and have a little small holding. So making bread and everything, and we were raising our own animals as well for that. But I don't know where mine came from because my family certainly weren't that way inclined. But I completely understand about we have a vision, and that is so inspiring that we lead people to come with us and continue from there. But it is all encompassing, isn't it? It reaches every aspect of our life. This belief that actually I don't have to rely on society to make bread for me or to tell me what I should be eating, and somebody else has made it with a whole load of salt and things that you don't really want to do.
Well, not just salt. Salt is great, but it's not salt that they're using. They're actually using a single chemical salt. The table salt that you get on in restaurants or is put into your products is not salt. It's denatured salt. It's like the difference between white sugar and molasses.
Yes.
Molasses has tons of minerals in it, and salt has tons of minerals in. This stuff they put on the table, and the only thing we use it for at home, we have a big thing of it, and we use it for getting blood out of cloth. And that's all we ever use table salt for. We use like proper sea salt, ground sea salt. Yes, you need salt. You need all the minerals in salt, but you do not need that type that is one single. So one of the best things to do is get rid of that salt. Use it for the washing, and don't use it otherwise. And that's exactly what's in prepared food. It's in there. And this is why salt becomes a problem.
You're so right, and it's so easy to forget actually where things come from, doesn't it? Because I live in a tiny little community, and of course we've had sea salt which we make ourselves, which we've done for years, because I've lived by the sea for years. But I know that sometimes Paul in his car has got a table salt which I don't, and he just uses that to go and pour on the beaches, on the holes, to get the shells to come up.
There you go.
Yeah.
Got some uses.
Yeah. So you're right. It's just for completely different uses, isn't it? But because we surround ourselves with like-minded people,
yes, it's
so lovely that we can kind of form our own community and forget that we are a little bit different than other people around us.
Ish. I think that's the problem. I put a big ish in there because I didn't realize how it was, because I formed my community and I spend my time with people who are a lot like me, even if it's just online. And for my kids, I think it was difficult because what they're looking at is mom is a complete outlier. Yeah, mom is an alien. Like, what the earth is my mum doing? Because all of these people out around us are doing something different. And I think in retrospect that's a very difficult way to grow up. And I've seen particularly with my two eldest that they've become anxious about the conventional. My husband's more conventional, and so if you look at a picture of our wedding, you have on one side you've got his family who look very conventional, on the other side you've got mine who look like a riot. Color, But so for me, I kind of grew up. For me, it was quite normal in a way. But I think for my
Yeah.
kids who've grown up in a more conventional setting, it's quite difficult. You start to question. No wonder you start to question.
Mm.
My mum's the only person thinks this.
Yeah.
Everybody else thinks that.
Yes.
You know, and
Yeah.
sometimes it will be like 10 years down the line, my husband will send me a Guardian article because whatever I've been telling him for 10 years has finally arrived in the Guardian. He'll be like, oh, look, sugar's bad for you.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
look,
Yeah.
10 years on, and yes, I've been saying this for 10 years. It's like,
So,
yeah.
so our choices really can make us quite lonely within our surroundings.
Yeah, they could. Or
So,
I think more my choices don't make me lonely, you know, because I'm good at finding people like yourself, you know, to really sort of get that affirmation from that what I'm doing is exciting and important. But I think sometimes for the people that tag along with us, whose choice it isn't, it can be a little bit lonely. Yeah, I think so.
And while we're on this conversation, let's broach the subject of the people we actually leave behind, because sometimes that's really tough for them. And if we're talking about breaking free, if we're talking about actually going to live the life that we want to live, making those choices that are different, making the choices that we believe are right for us and our family, sometimes it causes a bit of a backlash with other people, with family. How can you do that now? How can you choose to do that? That isn't right. And I feel that other people's fears often stop you living the life that you want to live.
They could, couldn't they?
Could. Yeah.
I think I live in a fortunate bubble of some sort, and it might be because I'm just talkative and I talk about my, you know, whatever I'm interested in, I'll talk about it. I think I just don't receive very much. I was going to say the word dissent. I sound like a megalomaniac. I know so many people, for example, during the last virus, the big one. I know so many people who lost friends and family over it, but nobody ever asked me, are you, you know, jacked?
Yes. Yeah.
They didn't even ask me. They knew I wouldn't be. And nobody had any, as far as I know, nobody avoided me or had any problems with me. I just lived in this little bubble. But I know that, you know, people in my team and, you know, people outside of that, people lost marriages, people lost long-term friends, people lost family members over this issue.
Yes.
And I'm just astounded by it.
Yes.
Because I've never, when you ask the question out front, I couldn't think for 1 second of people I've left behind. I mean, there'll be people that I haven't aligned with, so I've kind of like just not gelled with them. I haven't come forwards with them.
Yeah.
And then there's people that I gel with so well, like my friend Hayley, who's just gone through a really big operation. And they're like my chosen family, people who parent the way you parent.
Okay.
And, you know, people who give you the confidence to continue parenting peacefully and respectfully, taking children seriously, which was like such a huge thing for me, is that you need to have a voice as a child. People need to be tailoring their interactions with you to you. You know, like if you picked up one of my children when they were little, it did actually happen. You know, most babies and children are used to just being picked up by adults, and they're like, the adults just pick them up and they accept it. My kids were just like, what are you doing? They might pipe out a large scream, they might do that, but most likely they just turn into banana babies and you would drop them. You know, it happened a number of times in the toddler group that somebody at the door, my kids would try to exit, and they dropped my children and then came to me, I'm so sorry, I've dropped your child. And I'm like, yeah, no, you know,
it happens.
my child's not going to be picked up when they don't want to be picked up. You know, it's very much important for me that people have their will around their bodies. And so from when I was like working with my children when they were tiny, I'd be asking. They're a newborn and I'm asking them, you know, is it all right if I do this? Would you like me to do that? You know, and it's like constant babble of, is this good? Is that okay for you? You know, like, so important to have your self-sovereignty and your jurisdiction over your own body. That's such a
Absolutely.
big thing. Can't remember how I got down there, but that is such a big thing for me that I
Yes.
think,
Yeah.
yeah.
Tell me where homeopathy comes in to this. How did homeopathy come into your life?
So I think so my mum used it very lightly. So she used a lot of herbs. We always had herbs. So I remember as a child, if you had Veruca, you got hot kaolin poultice on it. If you, they were just like herbal, there'd be some jalap here, or there'd be something here. There was always sort of kind of herbal stuff, which was good because that meant we spent less time in the doctors with antibiotics. So we would gargle salt water if we had a sore throat. Tasted disgusting, but we did that. We would eat thyme if we had we'd do these different things. And so I was always used to that direction of things, direction of thinking. And then I remember that my mum had a slip disc and she was laid up. She used to get them quite often. And I think this is the last one I remember her getting. And she'd been changing gear in our old VW camper van and slipped a disc. And so she was laid up quite badly. I remember it being quite lengthy. And then she had lots of different things that she was trying. And then there was a homeopath across the road. We didn't know who she was or what she did because she was quite kept herself to herself, big green hedge. Dutch lady actually, and she came across and she put a pill under my mum's tongue, and I don't know what it was to this day, and she was up and about really soon afterwards. It created quite an impression on me.
Wow.
And then so I was interested. My mum always used to give me Califos. She was like, "Oh, you're so highly strung, have some Califos. You're so
Okay.
have some more Califos." And and then when I went to America and I lived in America, I was working as a Montessori teacher, and my co-teacher, I got pregnant with my second daughter. And up to that point, I was on antihistamines full time probably because I'd put a lot of steroids on people when I was nursing earlier in my life. And then I'd had, a TB vaccine. And straight after that, I'd gotten severe allergies. And then I lived with them for a lot of years, probably actually down to the fact that I was metal toxic. And it was just a critical point that came up. So I asked her, because she was a homeopath as well as a Montessori teacher, what can I take instead? And she gave me histaminum hydrochloricum. So I had been on antihistamines for 10 or more years at that point, and I just swapped over to this thing, the little sugar pills. It was absolutely amazing. And so from there on, then I moved into the house of somebody who was a homeopath. I bought a house from a homeopath. But it's so bizarre. I just kept getting led. Clearly, I just kept getting led because I didn't use homeopathy much. And then I moved into the house, and then I started having him treat my kids' acutes. And then I had another homeopath for 10 years or so. And then it was just, there's no homeopaths at night when you need them and your kid is sick. So I thought, right, I'm going to have to become a homeopath so I can treat my kids. I don't want them having all these iatrogenic diseases from medication. I'm aware that antibiotics are an issue, etc. And thankfully, Mary, you've come and brought us homeopathy 24/7, about 20 years late for me. But never too late. And maybe I wouldn't have become a homeopath because my main thing originally was to treat my children, in actual fact. But then I heard Alan Freestone on the subject of all these middle-class women becoming homeopaths as a hobby. And I best buckled down and actually make a thing of it, because there's too many people who qualify as homeopaths in the past and then didn't practice.
Exactly. And now you're starting a podcast.
I am, yes.
Homeopathy is
launched.
lives.
Yeah, it launched on the 22nd of July. Homeopathy is changing lives. A lot of the area I specialize in is children with complex issues such as autistic children with ADHD, and with PANS and PANDAS, which are neurological autoimmune conditions, and anything really sort of complex in that area. And so we will have a sort of leaning towards that in particular. But we're looking at homeopathy, but we're also looking at little hybrids of homeopathy like LDI, which is somewhere between allergy therapy and homeopathy. So we're looking at supplements and functional medicine to some extent as well. We're widening the umbrella a little, but mostly it's homeopathy. Yeah. Homeopathy is Changing Lives podcast.
Oh, that's so exciting. Well, we'll put a link down so that people can come and find out more about what you do, because you do such a lot. You've got courses, you've got a team of homeopaths. It's just always so exciting talking with you.
You too. I just, when I've got a big idea, I was like, should we have a Mavericks chat? And usually you've got a big idea that you're planning, and we do the same together.
Yeah.
So we might not talk a lot in between, but suddenly we're just like, oh, I've got something I need to run past Mary, and Mary's got something she needs to run past me. Here we come together and bust it out.
Exactly. It's just so lovely, isn't it, to be able to have somebody that that you can, just bounce ideas off. And it's
the really nice thing, I think, as well, is I feel like what you give out comes around, because years back, and I think it's 6 years or 7 years ago now, 6 or 7 years ago, so you came to me at Homeopathic Practice Building and did a course on how to use social media, like
how to go online,
communicate with people on social media, and Facebook and so on. And then what you've built is huge. And now I'm benefiting from what you've built, you see. It's wonderful.
I've
seen it before as well. There was another place where I've seen it. I've seen it in a number of places where you plant a seed and then somebody takes that seed and grows it. So I used to use no nappies with my kids, and somebody saw this in one of my children. Then she went and had a child, and she learnt so much more about it than I knew. And then she came back round, and I had another child, and at that point she was like, oh yeah, and you can do this and you can do that. And so she was teaching me way back round. And then there's a lady called Wild Pickle. She's got a company in the UK, and she teaches people fermentation. And I sowed the seed with her, but I can't remember how, but she told me I sowed the seed with her with something that I'd fermented and shown her. And now she's got a whole business doing it. She's teaching people, and now I can learn from her. I go to her for information. It's brilliant. You've just got to go and sow your seeds out in the world. You have no idea where your seeds are going to end up.
Exactly.
And how you're going to benefit.
Yes. Yeah. That's lovely. Oh, it's so fantastic talking to you, Ren. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, Mary.
We will put your links down below so that people can have a look at everything you're doing, and please come back and talk with us again.
I will do. Lots of love.
Thank you. Thank you, Ren. As always, lovely to talk to you. I do hope you enjoyed listening to our conversation about our own choices and how they don't always suit everyone in the family. Now, next week, I'm going to be talking to Tina Barrow, and Tina is going to be talking about her experience about taking back responsibility for her own health when she really needed to get healthy. She was born with a lot of allergies, and she's had a lot of health problems through her life. And I love talking to Tina because she gives me such hope that actually whatever's going on, you can research, you can really do good things. So I look forward to listening and talking with Tina, and I do hope you can join us. I do hope you've enjoyed these episodes, and I do hope you can subscribe to our channels. Now, there are various ways for you to listen to our podcast or watch it on video on YouTube. So whether it's iTunes, Spotify, or YouTube, please do subscribe, and please do leave us a review. If you leave us a review on these platforms, then more people will see our podcast. We just want more people to share the joy of homeopathy. It's a choice that everybody should know about. Please do everything you can to help us help more people.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode and look forward to listening to our next one. Please don't forget to follow our podcast on your chosen channel, and please do leave us a review so we can continue to share homeopathy with as many people as possible. If you do have any questions, please do reach out to us on any of our social platforms mentioned in the show notes. We at Homeopathy 24/7 hope to empower you on your natural health journey.